Okay, everyone, I just want to make sure that we understand that claim about 25%, although I bet some of you figured out the 25% at least for one of the two scenarios. For strategy one, it's pretty straightforward. If the SAT answers are being randomly generated, and you always guess the same one, you're only going to get it right if your guess matches the randomly generated guess. And since there are 4 randomly generated and therefore intuitively equally likely choices, you're going to get, on average, 25% of them right. That's pretty straightforward, I think. So any strategy where you pick the same answer, whether it's A, B, C, or D, you're going to get it right 25% of the time. I don't think that one is that hard to figure out. You may have had a little bit trickier time with the second one, which is, what if you randomly guess each time? Doesn't that change the odds? And I'd like to show you why it doesn't. You have to figure out every possible situation that could happen under this likelihood. Like, for example, suppose you randomly guess A and the test spits out a random C. Well, then you didn't match it. Suppose you guess a random D and the test puts out a random D. Well, that means you did get it right. So what we're going to do is we actually have to figure out every possible way that you can randomly guess and the test can randomly generate. So what I'm going to do right now is take a few seconds. I'm going to speed this up so it's not quite as annoying to look at. And I'm going to list every single way this can happen. Give me a sec. Okay, so you got it. There are actually 16 different arrangements of this. A, B, A, C, blah, 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 all the way down to D, D. So there's 16 possibilities of what could happen if both you and the test are randomly generating a letter from A to D. Of those 16, how many of them did you get right? Well, you got this one right. You got this one right. You got this one right. And you got this one right. So my friends, of the 16 possible arrangements, 4 of them you get correct. 4/16 is 1/4 is 25%. So it might seem a little confusing at first because some people think that staying with the one thing, I mean, this is the urban myth. My grandfather, as I mentioned in the footnote, used to use this. I have a better chance of winning if I always pick the same thing. You actually have no advantage over picking the same thing than generating random results every single time. It just might feel in some way, due to the idea of the gambler's ruin, it may feel in some way that if you stay with the same thing every time, the next outcome is likely to be different. Which is in some ways true, but the problem is that ignores the likelihood of random clumping. So I guess to be fair, it might be easier to always pick the same answer. That way you ensure that you'd get the same behavior as randomly guessing, which you probably aren't very good at doing. I know I'm not. So anyway, the point of this was just to show you that whether you stay or whether you randomly switch, it's always going to be 25%. Hope it helped.